Hmm. Stai, numai un pic, stai, ce mai trimis aici? Carboniferous period was a pure nightmare horror. Mie nu mi-e frică de insecte, ce ai?
The Carboniferous period spanned from roughly 358.9 to about 298.9 million years ago.
Oh my god.
During this era, the rocks formed to make up what we know as the Carboniferous system. The term Carboniferous is derived from the coal-rich layers found in the upper segments of these rock formations worldwide.
Rămâne, da, am
Long
înțeles.
before the first dinosaurs and pterosaurs roamed the earth, a distinct group of animals dominated the landscape: insects. During the Carboniferous period, some of the earliest animals and insects reached impressive sizes, comparable to modern-day hawks. Notably, flightless arthropods of this time could grow larger than the average human. The Carboniferous period, known for its hot and humid climate, was a time when vast, swampy rainforests dominated the landscape. This environment was ideal for early animals to flourish and evolve. Diverse species emerged, competing with amphibians that were forming distinct groups. Dubbed the Golden Age of Sharks, this era saw the rise of shark-like fish after the extinction of armored superpredators like Dunkleosteus. These fish diversified, becoming the dominant aquatic carnivores and taking on various forms. Amphibians also thrived during this period, sharing the waters with these formidable fish. Notably, it wasn't just amphibians and fish that developed unique traits. Some soft-bodied creatures evolved in unusual ways too. Additionally, a few species of lobe-finned fish and sea scorpions exhibited quirky characteristics. The animal kingdom of the Carboniferous period featured amphibians with massive boomerang-shaped heads and fish resembling winged dragons. Let's delve into some of the fascinating beasts of the Carboniferous period. Meganeura. Meganeura, meaning large-nerved, also known as the giant dragonfly, was a massive insect from the Carboniferous era, soaring over what is now North America and Europe. Comparable in size to an eagle, Meganeura holds the title of the largest dragonfly ever, often referred to as the rulers of the Carboniferous skies. Charles Brongniart first discovered this giant in 1880 in France. During its reign, Meganeura shared its habitat with reptiles, giant amphibians, and other enormous insects. However, as the Carboniferous period ended and oxygen levels dropped, these sky rulers eventually vanished. Meganeura, similar in build to modern dragonflies but much larger, stretched nearly a meter long, making it the size of an eagle. With a length of about 75 centimeters or 2.5 feet and weighing 150 grams, it was among the largest insects ever and the biggest dragonfly of all time. Ruling the skies of the Carboniferous era, Meganeura was usually unstoppable. As a swift aerial predator, Meganeura used its powerful arms and mandibles to tear apart prey, usually other insects and possibly small vertebrates like lizards or amphibians. This agile hunter could make sharp mid-air turns and skillfully dodge streams of water. When males fought, they could halt instantly and pivot on a dime. These giant dragonflies gathered around fragmented lakes to breed, laying their larvae in the water. Males vied for mating rights with females, but had to get very close to discern each other's sex. Like their modern counterparts, Meganeura could achieve speeds that would be dizzying to a human. Arthropleura. Arthropleura, meaning jointed ribs, was a massive millipede-like arthropod from the late Carboniferous era, roaming the lands of what is now North America and Europe. This distant relative of today's millipedes and centipedes reached lengths of up to 3 meters, making it the largest known terrestrial arthropod and the largest land invertebrate ever. Its enormous size was possible due to the high oxygen levels in the Carboniferous atmosphere. Despite its intimidating size, Arthroplura was a herbivore, one of the earliest primarily plant-eating land animals. While it had strong jaws, it's unlikely that it relied on poison for defense. This giant peacefully consumed vegetation, navigating the lush, oxygen-rich forests of its time. Arthroplura roamed North America and Scotland during the late Carboniferous, around 315 to 299 million years ago. It shared its habitat with creatures like Megarachne, Meganura, primitive reptiles, and giant predatory amphibians. Since its discovery in 1854, numerous fossilized footprints of Arthroplura have been found along the coast of Scotland, particularly in the Scottish land of Arran. Arthroplura, possibly the largest arthropod of the Carboniferous period, measured between 2 to 3 meters, 6.6 to 10 feet on average, making it as large as a man or a crocodile, and as long as a car. Some rare colossal specimens were even found to be around 6 meters or 20 feet in length. As the largest known land arthropod, Arthroplura was a massive relative of today's millipedes, closely resembling a giant centipede millipede. Arthroplura roamed the forest floors of the Carboniferous era. Despite its formidable appearance, this massive arthropod was a herbivore, feeding on decaying foliage, dead wood, and leaves in the slimy swamp forests. Though known for its vegetarian diet, its powerful jaws could still deliver a nasty bite. As juveniles, Arthroplura consumed meat and was unable to digest plants until they matured. It was among the first animals to attack Despite their strong jaws, it's unlikely they used practically blind, Arthroplura relied on its instinct, smell and touch to navigate and detect other animals. Although generally timid, it could become highly aggressive and be easily provoked into attacking. Most Arthroplura found refuge in piles of leaves or foliage, or small underground dens, while some ventured out in the open. With body armor that blended seamlessly with its surroundings, Arthroplura was well camouflaged. However, this armor offered no protection against the rampant forest fires of the Carboniferous. Despite their attempts to seek cover by crouching on the ground, many were tragically consumed by the flames. Stethecanthus. Stethecanthus, a small but formidable prehistoric shark, thrived during the late Denovian and early Carboniferous periods. Measuring up to 3 feet long and weighing around 20 pounds, this sleek predator was a constant threat to small fish and even other smaller sharks. What made Stethecanthus truly unique was the bizarre ironing board protrusion on the backs of the males. With its rough, rather than smooth surface, experts speculate that this structure may have functioned as a docking mechanism, allowing males to attach to females during mating securely. Determining the exact appearance and function of the spine brush complex, as paleontologists refer to the ironing board, took extensive fieldwork and time. When Stethecanthus specimens were first unearthed in Europe and North America in the late 19th century, these structures were initially thought to be a new type of fin. It wasn't until the 1970s, when it was discovered that only males had these ironing boards, that the clasper theory gained acceptance. With the large, flat ironing boards on their backs, adult male Stethecanthus was likely not the fastest swimmers. This, along with the unique arrangement of their teeth, suggests that Stethecanthus was primarily a bottom feeder. However, they probably were open to chasing down slower fish and cephalopods when the chance arose. Orthocanthus. Orthocanthus, meaning straight spine, was a formidable long freshwater fish that lived from the late Carboniferous to the early Permian period, roughly 315 to 275 million years ago. This genus includes 12 different species, 2 of which inhabited Texas around 280 million years ago, sharing the landscape with well-known Permian creatures like Dimetrodon, Edaphosaurus, and Angus. Orthocanthus belonged to the Xenocanthids, an order of cartilaginous fish known as strange spines, which lived from the Carboniferous to the Triassic period. Though not true sharks, they were close
武器は
relatives.
治ったわ
The most famous xenocanthid, Xenocanthus, is measured 6 feet long, and its fossils have been discovered worldwide in rocks from the Carboniferous and Permian periods. These xenocanthids were freshwater species, and likely the largest fish in their environments. At 3 meters long, Orthocanthus was much larger than the amphibians it coexisted with, probably serving as the apex predator in its habitat. A study of coprolites from a prehistoric freshwater shark suggests that these fish resorted to cannibalism during tough times. The shark in question, Orthocanthus, was identified by the distinctive triangular shape of its fossilized droppings. When other food sources were scarce, Orthocanthus appeared to prey on its own kind. Fossilized coprolites discovered in the Myoto coalfield of New Brunswick, Canada, reveal a grim truth. These 300-million-year-old shark droppings were filled with the remains of juvenile Orthocanthus, providing evidence of cannibalism. Specifically, this is an example of filial cannibalism, where adults intentionally hunt the young of their own species, sometimes even their own offspring. Filial cannibalism is seen in various modern shark species, such as the bull shark. Researchers believe Orthocanthus may have occupied a similar ecological niche to these contemporary sharks. Both Orthocanthus and bull sharks can migrate between saltwater and freshwater. For Orthocanthus, this unique adaptation likely played a crucial role in its ability to colonize inland freshwater environments. Megarachne. Megarachne, meaning great spider, and often known as the Mesothele spider, was a giant arachnid from the late Carboniferous era, found in what is now North America and Europe. Dubbed the Black Widow of the prehistoric world, it was the largest spider species ever discovered, roughly the size of a human head. Despite its relatively small size compared to other Carboniferous carnivores, Megarachne was one of the apex predators of its type. The species was first described in 1874 by American zoologist Nakanaka Naraka after a specimen was discovered in the Oak Hill Hills of Scotland. With a body length of just over a foot, Megarachne was an impressively large spider, boasting fangs that matched its formidable size. Its body, excluding the legs, was as large as a human head, making it the largest spider ever known. It surpassed the modern Goliath birding spider in size and mass, and its lifespan was greater than that of the giant spider. Despite its size, Megarachne was remarkably fast and agile, capable of moving at speeds around 10 miles per hour, or 16 kilometers per hour, and leaping distances up to 32 feet, much like modern jumping spiders. Moreover, its eyes, though distinctively designed, provided it with excellent sharp vision and a full 360-degree view of its surroundings. Like most spiders, Megarachne was a solitary ambush predator that lived in underground burrows, similar to modern trapdoor and turret spiders. Besides constructing orb webs, Megarachne would create silk trip lines around its burrow to detect vibrations from potential prey. When prey was detected, Megarachne would swiftly ambush and chase it down. Once caught, the spider would drag the victim back to its burrow, inject digestive juices, and dissolve the prey from the inside out. The resulting liquid meal. Living in caves came with significant risks for Megarachne, primarily due to the threat of flooding from rising Carboniferous waters. When floods destroyed their homes, surviving Megarachne had to either construct new burrows or venture into the open in search of another shelter. These solitary spiders were highly territorial and did not share their homes, even with others of their kind. As a result, a wandering Megarachne was vulnerable to the era's larger predators. Despite these challenges, Megarachne was a remarkably successful predator of its time. Tullimonstrum. Tullimonstrum, commonly called the Tully Monster, was a soft-bodied creature from the clade Bilateria that existed about 307 million years ago in shallow tropical waters near estuaries. Fossils of this intriguing animal have been discovered in the Mason Creek fossil beds in Illinois, United States. Growing to about 35 centimeters or 1.1 feet in length, Tullimonstrum had a unique appearance, with stalked eyes like those of a snail, an elongated body resembling that of a squid, and a pair of vertical ventral fins at its rear. It also featured a long proboscis, equipped with around 16 small, sharp teeth, 8 on each jaw. Scientists suggest that this peculiar appendage was used to probe the mud for food, allowing Tullimonstrum to feed on both living organisms and decaying matter. The classification of Tullimonstrum remains a secret, as scientists have to discover whether it is a mollusk, a vertebrate, or an unclassified worm. Some researchers suggest it might be a vertebrate due to the presence of what appears to be a primitive backbone in some fossil specimens. These fossils also revealed internal structures resembling gill sacs and teeth, similar to those of modern lampreys. Additionally, a study using non-destructive laser analysis of the fossilized tissues found that they were composed of proteins rather than collagen. This protein composition strongly supports the hypothesis that Tullimonstrum was indeed a vertebrate. Some scientists argue that Tullimonstrum was an invertebrate, highlighting the challenge of proving the presence of backbone. The fossils found are mostly from marine rocks, which primarily preserve soft tissue, leaving little evidence of internal structures. Additionally, the results from the laser study of fossilized tissues might not be entirely accurate, as not all tissues may have been protein-based. Furthermore, researchers have pointed out that no Tullimonstrum fossils have shown otic capsules, structures for balance, or a lateral line, a sensory system for detecting movement, pressure, and vibrations. These features are typically found in all aquatic vertebrates, casting doubt on the vertebrate classification of Tullimonstrum. Adestus. Adestus was a massive, shark-like fish that roamed the waters between 313 and 307 million years ago in regions that are now the United States, Russia, and the United Kingdom. The largest species, Adestus over 6.7 Adestus is based on the size of its skull and fossilized tooth walls. The upper tooth wall could grow up to 32 centimeters, or 1 foot, while the lower wall extended to 43 centimeters, or 1.4 feet. The tooth walls of Adestus were centrally positioned in its mouth, earning it the nickname Scissor-Tooth Shark. Each wall featured up to 12 serrated teeth that grew at the back and gradually moved forward before being expelled. The lower wall was more curved than the upper one. Many scientists believe that Adestus had unique jaws like scissors that slice through smaller fish and soft-bodied creatures. Studies suggest that its jaws operated with a two-gear system, enabling the lower jaw to move forward and backward in a soaring motion. Though no complete fossilized body imprints of Adestus have been discovered, researchers infer from the fossils of its close relatives that it likely had a body shape similar to a great white shark. It probably featured triangular pectoral fins and a tall, forked tail fin, which would have made it a swift, open-water predator. Pulmonoscorpius kirktanensis. Pulmonoscorpius kirktanensis was a massive scorpion-like creature that lived around 336 to 326 million years ago. Fossils of this species were first unearthed at the East Kirkton Quarry in Scotland in 1994. Further analysis revealed that its body structure was similar to modern-day scorpions. Among the complete specimens found, some measured about 28 centimeters, nearly a foot long. However, the discovery of a large, fragmentary specimen led scientists to estimate that some of these ancient scorpions reached an impressive length of 71 centimeters, over 2 feet. Pulmonoscorpius was not only massive, but also had 4 distinct eyes. It had a pair of median eyes, likely used for visual clarity and spatial awareness, and a pair of lateral eyes that probably detected light. This combination of eyes gave Pulmonoscorpius a significant advantage in spotting predators and prey. Unlike modern scorpions that inhabit jungles, forests, deserts, and mountains, Pulmonoscorpius lives in swamps. Scientists believe this giant scorpion was omnivorous, preying on small amphibians and early reptiles. It likely used its front claws and tail, similarly to today's species, planting on prey with its claws and injecting venom from its stinger before consuming them. Mesothyrus enormus. Mesothyrus enormus was a gigantic flying insect that lived about 309 million years ago in what is now North America. Compared to Meganura monni, Mesothyrus enormus is estimated to have had a wingspan of around 56 centimeters, nearly 2 feet. This estimate comes from fragmentary fossil remains discovered at the Mason Creek fossil bed in Illinois. Despite the limited fossil evidence, scientists believe Mesothyrus enormus resembled modern dragonflies, with multiple wings that enable it to fly. Mesothyrus is thought to have been a herbivore, feeding on plant insects. This assumption is based on its closest relative, which had deep-like mouthparts with long, sharp styles. It's theorized that Mesothyrus enormus also had a plant-like organ for piercing plants and extracting their usage. Scientists believe it had a pair of small winglets in front of its larger wings, similar to its relatives. This feature would have given Mesothyrus enormous exceptional aerial mobility, providing a distinct advantage over other species.
It was a beautiful night. Both moons hung low in the horizon, thin red crescents, their feeble light glimmering on the ocean. The sun, a disk of orange that dominated the sky for weeks at a time, finally dipped below the cruised. The heat of high summer had passed, were no longer a humid swamp, and the sky was now ablaze with the light the most ardent of astronomers knew at heart. Suddenly, one of the stars began to brighten. Henrik was watching the light as it grew and grew in intensity. Cause for alarm, generations ago they had deduced that this was a cosmic explosion, the triggering of death of the star. Despite their advanced knowledge, they still preferred to call these events by their traditional name.
Everythingが破壊されるのをとくと見よ。
All of the others in the sky, becoming even brighter than the dozen planets of their system. For long, it was brighter even than the dual full moon. Parties broke out spontaneously across the globe. Guest stars were common, occurring roughly once a year, but this was sure to be one for the record books. As most people celebrated, one observer looked on with consternation. They were tasked with monitoring wind patterns in the upper atmosphere. Few of their satellites were providing real-time information, and their measurements indicated a dramatic drop in ozone levels, in perfect conjunction with the increasing luminosity of the guest star. If this continued, it appeared that they would begin to affect the ozone layer. Star to appear so close, over, it would spell the end of any civilization. And in this case, one of the first worlds to arise in the cosmos less than a billion years after the Big Bang, supernovae would have regularly the sky. The early universe was an active, fertile and place. At that time, galaxies forming, bursting into being round after round in heat star formation. While these explosions enriched the interstellar medium with the heavy elements needed to fashion rocky planets and possibly life itself, they also posed a tremendous risk to any life that emerged. And so, when did those worlds first emerge, and what were they like? How can we know what variety of planets there are out there, both in the modern day and distant, ancient cosmos? The journey to the first planets will take us to an uncountable variety of wondrous worlds, from great blue Jupiters with atmospheres of raining glass, to tiny frozen rocks teetering on the abyss, and may even give us hints about the mystery of alien life in the universe.
刀は抜いたわ。
The Europa Clipper space probe launched on the 14th of October and will use gravitational assists
Maybe I
from
get a
Mars
more.
and the Earth to arrive at arguably Jupiter's most interesting moon in 2030. Of course, if those gravitational assists are misjudged even slightly, then the probe could spiral off into oblivion. Precision is hugely important when exploring the universe. This video has been sponsored by Novium, and their hover pens are a fantastic, classy gift idea and one that reflects the importance of precision and smart design in space exploration. Crowned one of Time's best inventions of 2022, the Novium hover pen is a stylish and eye-catching ballpoint pen that hovers at a 23.5-degree angle, just like the Earth's axial tilt, without the aid of electricity, just using gravity and neodymium magnets.
Tilt according to what?
On its base is crafted from aircraft-grade aluminium, is refillable.
How do you know something
and provides
tilted if you don't have a
comfortable and
fixed
smooth writing experience?
comparison?
Designed by an actual physicist, the hover pen is inspired by outer space, and the premium version even comes with a real shard of the Myon-Yonah-Luster meteorite embedded within it. It's the perfect gift for space aficionados, and they also have a new edition which combines a rollerball and fountain pen into one sleek package. So, click on the link in the description or use the QR codes on screen and use the code HOTU to get 10% off any hover pen and free shipping to most countries including North America, Europe and Australia.
よし。行こう。
There may be an alien civilization right around the galactic corner, or at least the beginnings of one. It may be on a planet not unlike our own, a water-rich world orbiting a yellow-white star.
ついてるわね。
Maybe something far different, like a parched moon of a gas giant hugging the limits of habitability around a red dwarf. But it's unlikely that the signs of life will be obvious,
Oh, it's squirrel.
otherwise we would have seen it by now. Instead, they will be subtle, mere shifts
Fucking
in the
squirrel.
spectrum of light. Something that only a super telescope of the next generation will be capable of detecting. And so Courtney Dressing knows that she has to get this right. A professor at the University of California, Berkeley, she was tapped by NASA to co-lead the initial development of a telescope so ambitious it will make the James Webb comparison. Currently named the Habitable Worlds Observatory, the telescope itself won't be launched for decades. According to Dressing, if it were to be imagined as a 100-meter race to launch, we would be putting on our shoes. But the Habitable Worlds Observatory won't just be a planet-hunting telescope. It will be humanity's first serious attempt to search for life itself, and will do so with an unfolded mirror several times larger than Webb. With that kind of resolving power, it will take pictures of dozens of nearby Earth-like exoplanets, and will have the resolving power needed to search for biosignatures or traces of elements hinting at the presence of life.
いたずらはやめて。
While current telescopes like the James Webb can perform similar kinds of observations, they are limited to only giant planets. This new super telescope will instead target
我こそは
Earth-like
妖刀の
worlds,
化身。
small,
The Alpha
rocky
fan.
planets. It is the future of space telescopes. And so how far we've come
切れぬもの
in
な
a
し。
mere 30 years.
RHS 12.
For centuries, astronomers had assumed that strange alien planets orbited other stars. It's not a huge leap in logic. Our sun is nothing special, neither extremely small or extremely large, and so there should be nothing special about the appearance of planets in our own solar system. Thus, any average star should probably have planets. But what kind of planets? And how many? Does every star, of which there are hundreds of billions in the Milky Way galaxy alone, have a planetary system? And if it does
とってもレアなアイテ
system
ムに見える
look
わ。
like ours? With a quartet of rocky planets and a quartet of giants. Is Jupiter the largest possible and Mercury the smallest? And yet, as astronomy advanced into the late 20th century, the vast majority of astronomers believed it was a fool's errand to go after the solar worlds. According to Princeton astronomer
Oh,
George
ARIGATO.
Wynne, exoplanet hunters in the 1980s and 90s worked in the atmosphere of skepticism. The main issue was finding them. Planets may seem vast, so vast that its curvature is very perceptible. Our own sun could swallow the entire Earth into a million times and still more. The largest planet in the solar system, Jupiter, weighs less than 1,000th the mass of the Sun. Indeed, if you were an astronomer viewing the solar system from 10 parsecs away, Jupiter and the Sun would appear to be half an arc second separated from each other. Roughly the same physical diameter of a small coin, sitting several kilometers away from you. And size isn't the only difficulty when hunting for planets. If an object is luminous enough, it can still make itself visible and known to astronomers. Take neutron stars, for example. They are no bigger than a typical city, and yet they blaze so intensely they can be seen from millions of light years away. The planets don't have any advantages here either. The Sun is roughly 250 million times brighter. First confirmed exoplanet was discovered in 1992. It wasn't by any sort of traditional astronomical technique. And the planet didn't orbit any traditional kind of astronomical object. Two astronomers, the Canadian Dale Frail and the Polish Alexander Wolszczan, announced an unexpected discovery. Two planets orbiting a pulsar. Not a nearby star, not a mid-sized star, not any of the usual suspects. One of the strangest objects in the universe. A pulsar is a kind of neutron star that blasts beams of radiation into space as it rotates. They are arguably some of the most extreme objects in the universe, second only to black holes. At only a few kilometers across, they are relatively tiny.
Black holes.
Yet due to their crushing gravity, the tallest mountains on their surfaces are only a few millimeters high. And if you fell from one, you would reach half the speed of light before you hit the ground. The fastest pulsar spins at tens of thousands of revolutions per minute, and the pulses they release contain photons with energies 10 trillion times stronger than visible light, flooding their surroundings with deadly radiation. And yet PSR B1257+12, sitting over 2,000 light years away from the Earth in the direction of the Virgo constellation, seemed to have a planetary system. Although Hoyo and Wuchang managed to find evidence for them not by studying the system directly, too far away. Instead, they used subtle variations in pulsing signals. Planets do not have much mass compared to their parent star, but it's not zero. This sort of gravity can be felt from even the weakest of sources. And so as planets orbit their parent stars, they gently tug at them, causing the star to wobble ever so slightly. This, amongst other things, is shift in the light coming from the star. The physics behind this is the same as the rising and lowering of pitch of a particle ambulance. When the star is moving towards us, light gets squeezed to shorter wavelengths and higher frequencies. The opposite happens when the star is moving away from us. Pulsars make for exceptionally delicate instruments for measuring Doppler shifts, because their pulses are incredibly regular, flashing away on our sky with a regularity, cadence and perfection of rhythm that compete with our own atomic clocks. Kuro and Wuchang also accounted for the motion of the Earth and the Sun. Their timings due to the pulsar's radio emissions traveling through the interstellar medium, and the glitch where the pulsar suddenly and unexpectedly switches frequencies, they found a Doppler shift that could only be explained by the presence of the mass roughly 4 times. And after a naming competition held by the International Astronomical Union in 2015, humanity's first two known exoplanets are now known as Poltergeist and Phobator, a beast-like character from Ovid that appears in dreams. They're joined in this strange system by their sibling Draga, named after undead creatures from Norse mythology and discovered in 1994, which is currently the smallest known exoplanet, at less than twice the mass of our moon. A testament to just how sensitive pulsars can be as exoplanet detectors. And the names are fitting. Pulsars are undead stars, the leftover cores of once bright, living suns that still emit leftover radiation. And so it wasn't until 1995 that astronomers found their first exoplanet orbiting a sun-like star. That discovery required much more precision, determination, and outright luck. My reaction was that it must be wrong somewhere. We used Swiss astronomer Didier Queloz of Cambridge University, Nobel laureate and one of the discoverers. I was a little bit ashamed to communicate this potential error to my supervisor, as I thought I'd made a mistake. But he had not. Working with his research advisor and future Nobel co-laureate Michel Mayor, Queloz found the first hints of a reliable signal in the shift of radiation coming from the Wukong Pegasus, an unremarkable sun-like star sitting about 50 light years away. Data implied something really bizarre. The signal implied that the planet was massive, roughly the same mass of Jupiter, but orbiting far too close to its star, near 0.05 astronomical units, one-eighth the distance that Mercury orbits the Sun. It takes days to convince the astronomical community of the validity of the observation. This is regarded as requiring a certain now, nature is far stranger than imagination, especially when it comes to exoplanets. And in the years since that momentous discovery, astronomers have developed an array of techniques for finding exoplanets and analyzing them. Many even more bizarre than Wuchang's pulsar planets, as below the mammoth, close-orbiting world. Take, for example, the planet HD 189733b, a gas giant 10% heavier than Jupiter, roughly 65 light-years away. Unlike the orange and yellow hues familiar to Jupiter, this exoplanet has a deep cobalt blue atmosphere, and that atmosphere is deadly. An umbrella wouldn't help you here. It rains glass, sideways, winds up to 7 times the speed of sound.
Damn.
Or take
There's no escaping that shit.
TRES-2b, the darkest known exoplanet. Sitting roughly 700 light-years from Earth, this exoplanet is exceptionally dark. Initial estimates suggest that it reflects less than 1% of all the light hitting its surface. Despite its vast size, it's larger than Jupiter. Whatever its atmosphere is made of, it's capable of absorbing almost all visible light. A close-up approach of TRES-2b is like landing on the surface of a black hole. And then there's J1407b, the super Saturn, located 450 light-years away. A gas giant, this exoplanet hosts a ring system that would put Saturns to shame. Orbiting J1407b are over 30 individual ring systems, each one millions of kilometers across. All combined, the rings span a diameter of 180 million kilometers and contain an entire Earth's mass of material, making it over 600 times larger than Saturn. The rings utterly dwarf the planet itself. Picture in your mind the wildest planet imaginable, with whatever crystal composition and orbit you can dream of. Chances are that this planet exists, and thousands more beyond. When it comes to discovering new exoplanets, the science of ship the radial velocity technique involves nothing more than staring at a star for a long period of time and waiting. The transit method involves searching the heavens for tiny eclipses. If a star hosts a planet, and the plane of its orbit just happens to line up with our point of view, occasionally the planet will cross in front of the face of its star, temporarily blocking the star's light. This effect is immense and relies on pure luck. If you stare at enough stars for long enough periods of time, you'll eventually detect the telltale signs of a planetary transit. 2009, NASA's Kepler Space Telescope became the world's premier planetometer. This telescope continuously observed roughly 500,000 stars in the direction of the constellation Cygnus, pushing the time with slight dimming. Alone, the treasure trove of nearly 1,000 confirmed exoplanets and thousands of candidates. one of the very first planets found by the Kepler Space Telescope, was full of wonders.
ちょっと待ってて。
Something ripped straight from science fiction. Kepler 16b is a gas giant with a mass between Saturn and Jupiter sitting 200 light years away. What made it surprising was not the planet itself, but the
全てを終わらせる。
Kepler 16b doesn't just orbit one star, but two. The first ever confirmed circumbinary planet. Sitting on the surface of the planet, you could watch
これで戦場
twin
に戻れ
suns
る。
dip below the horizon in a recreation of the iconic Star Wars scene. Despite the success of the transit method, astronomers need a variety of tools to paint as complete a portrait as possible for every exoplanet, especially in the hunt for the very first in the universe. The transit method is by far the easiest method known to find exoplanets, but it only gives a measure of the planet's radius based on the dip in the starry light. Astronomers have to use other methods to estimate mass.
いたずらはやめて。ちょっと。全てを終わらせる。
Less likely to be made of light elements like hydrogen, helium, and more likely to be made of carbon, silicon, and water. Kepler's successor, the transiting exoplanet survey instrument, or TESS for short, uses a variety of
全てを終わらせる。
to measure as many properties as possible. At present,
終わりなき大厄災が来るだ
TESS has identified 7,138 candidate exoplanets. And in 2024, TESS discovered PIC 36510766b.
私こそリズム。
Kilometers from Earth. The discoverers nicknamed it Phoenix, and for good reason. This planet is so close to its parent star that it should be nothing but a roasted
便
cinder.
利じゃない。
Especially
普通に
after
満
the
ち
star
た顔
entered
で
the giant
震
phase.
えおのの
Somehow,
け
this world has retained its atmosphere, an incredible and so far unexplainable feat. But astronomers suspect that this act of planetary resistance won't last long, and the world will lose its grip on its own atmosphere in less than 100 million years.
Cum fac rost
The
de
next
viață
great
din aia
planet
să
hunter
revive?
will be the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope, which is currently scheduled to launch in May of 2027. Its unique properties will allow it to create a census of up to 1 million exoplanets in the Milky Way galaxy. But perhaps the most important method of revealing an exoplanet is studying its light directly. During the transit phase, most of the light reaching our telescopes comes from the parent
Iar o dată.
Some of that light is either reflected off the planet or passes through its atmosphere. The concentration of the light is incredibly small. If we capture a strong enough signal from the transit event, we can isolate the contribution from the planet and measure some of the elements present. For this technique, however, we can only use the most powerful, most sensitive instruments, like the Hubble or James Webb Space Telescopes. Indeed, Webb was designed with exactly this goal
ちょっ
in
と
mind.
修復させ
And
て。
already, it has mapped the atmospheres of scores of exoplanets, finding evidence for molecules such as methane, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and more. And it is Webb that has shown us that not all exoplanets are grim wastelands. There are also those that show the hopeful signs of life, like K2-18b, a planet sitting only 120 light-years from Earth and first studied in detail with the new telescope in 2023. This world is a sub-Neptune, and a spectrum of its abundant atmosphere shows the faint signatures of methane and carbon dioxide. These elements are
Oh, fucking way.
a lifeless atmosphere, and also a life-filled one. And so, our hunt for alien worlds is still at its infancy. And yet even with only a few thousand confirmed detections, we've deduced the existence of worlds that we could not possibly have imagined. The universe is bewildering in complexity and dizzying in its scope.
ちょっと修復させて。
Exoplanets are no exception. As we attempt to plunge deep into the depths of the past to discover the first exoplanets, we must begin by confronting the amazing variety that could possibly exist.
全てが破壊されるのをとくと見よ。
Planet is being torn apart.
我こそは陽光の化身
Parent, however, is fairly normal. A K-type star, slightly smaller and cooler than the Sun, sitting about 66 light-years away. But it hosts a small family of planets in a peculiar series of orbits. A gas giant with a very close orbit, roughly twice the distance that Mercury orbits around the Sun, and the second planet roughly the mass of Uranus, sitting even closer to its star with just a 14-day orbit. And in 2024, a team of astronomers led by Kane at the University of California, Riverside, announced the tentative discovery of yet another body. This was no gas giant, but a terrestrial body, 30% wider than the Earth, but clinging to the star in a brutal.
全てを終わらせる
Of course, no life likely exists on this planet. No atmosphere, no water. This world is scorched by its proximity to its star. But that's not the only source of its bodies. The dance of the gas giants in their incredibly close orbits means that they exert enormous tidal forces on the Earth-like planet, stretching and squeezing it, cutting. Tidal forces are easy to calculate, just a simple application of Newton's laws. But it's also easy to calculate how much energy is transferred from its giant siblings into tidal deformations of the small terrestrial world. And the conclusion
便利じゃない
is startling. Constant stretching and squeezing, pulled here and there by the gravitational forces of the giants, releases so much energy that the world itself is glowing, caught in the midst of a perfect tidal storm. With an estimated surface temperature of 2,600 Kelvin, this Earth-like planet
全てが破壊されるのをとくと見よ。
This is no mere speculation or flight of science fiction. This is a sound scientific estimation based on a small amount of information. One example, clever research can reveal the wonders, magic, and millions of light years away. In almost all cases for these thousands of known alien planets, we
目を
know
断ち
about
切る汚れなき地を守る
data represented by a line, plot. But astronomers were enormously clever and used to making great leaps of insight based on meager scraps.
Speri, ora mo
That
salvat.
line is a spectrum. The concept
Mettiamo
of
un
atomic
attimo.
spectra was developed in the
Two-handle la
1800s,
distruggiamo.
before we even understood the nature of atoms and subatomic particles. Indeed, explaining atomic spectra was one of the primary motivations towards the development of quantum mechanics. Each element on the periodic table emits light at a combination of very specific wavelengths, and each molecule does the same. When astronomers look at a distant exoplanet as it transits in front of its parent star, some of the light filters through the planet's atmosphere,
Egg
and the
eater.
elements and
You like
molecules of
eggs?
that atmosphere each leave their individual fingerprint on the spectrum.
Kinda.
And so by examining the spectrum, astronomers can identify the presence of many elements. But it is far from easy. Astronomers need high-resolution data and a raw volume of starlight to get a solid spectrum. And in the often hot and complex atmosphere of alien worlds, molecules can mix together in the same spectrum, especially in the narrow range of wavelengths that astronomers can usually only access. From there, astronomers turn to modeling to build their understanding of these foreign worlds. We understand how physics and chemistry work. We know how atmospheres can react to different intensities of different wavelengths of light. We know how gravity affects the ability of a planet to retain an atmosphere, and we know how molecules mix and dance together in an atmosphere.
Asta scap polurile în
It
Genshin,
does
doamne
require some
putele.
guesswork,
Nu mai
and
scap de
statements
ele
about
niciunde.
exoplanets always up for revision.
Dar măcar
From
ăsta nu-i
these
pay to win, că n-are
techniques,
cum.
astronomers have been able to deduce an astounding
dracu e?
variety and complexity of planets within the galaxy. Perhaps the greatest surprise of all was that we were able to detect exoplanets so easily in the 1990s. That's because the first known exoplanets were completely unlike anything we've ever known from our experience in the solar system. Planets far larger than Jupiter, orbiting closer than Mercury does around the Sun. These worlds are known as hot Jupiters, and they should be impossible. Giant planets can't form close to stars, because these planets are made of mostly hydrogen and helium, the lightest of the elements that get easily blown away by the energetic output of young stars.
Wow,
And
ăsta e
yet,
ei, ăsta e al
hot
lui,
Jupiters aren't just our first
al
known
lui
exoplanets,
personalul meu, cum o
they
cheamă,
are
Yumi.
among the most common. Astronomers now believe that hot Jupiters start out their lives in distant orbits, but through gravitational interactions and planetary reshuffling find themselves migrating inwards to closer orbits,
Dreptate cu
where they
skinul.
spend the rest of their days roasting alive. Indeed,
Cătănă.
some hot Jupiters experience such intense
Hai de pula
radiation
mea.
that they are bloated and
brat of the Lich
distended, in some cases tidal forces turning them egg-shaped.
Da.
While hot Jupiters are certainly fascinating, they are unlikely
Da,
homes for
câte are.
life, at least the kind of life that we know, the kind
Lol.
of life that arises on small, rocky planets in the habitable zones of their stars.
Oh.
But exoplanet surveys have found many such worlds, especially
Damn,
around small
son.
red dwarf stars, because those are easier to find with our current techniques. And while we have yet to confirm the existence of liquid water
Triple
on any
strike.
extrasolar planet, we have many candidates well deserving of follow-up
Oh, câți bani
investigation
poți să pierzi
with
aici?
Habitable Worlds Observatory.
Damn.
But we just don't know how many exoplanets exist in the Milky Way. At a bare minimum, we
that's it.
suspect that there is, on average,
Очень
one
файна
planet
stuff.
for every star. But many estimates suggest that planets are much more common than that, including rough estimates on the number of rogue
Când skinul are
planets,
video-ul lui, știi că e
exoplanets
ce
without
treabă.
a parent star drifting through interstellar space. There may be trillions of worlds in our galaxy alone.
Asta îmi place.
And so no matter what, despite
Cataclysm.
decades of effort, we've only surveyed an incredibly small fraction of all the
What?
planets in the Milky Way. But even with this scarcity of data, we
Oh,
can
it's even
start to
bends.
build a rough estimate of the number of potentially
Mas cu
habitable
pillow
worlds in the
fight.
galaxy, and start to put together a picture of how early in the history of the universe
Oh my
planets
god.
could have arisen. And those guesses suggest that if we are searching for life and
Da.
want to hunt for that life on Earth-sized planets orbiting
Jesus
sun-like
Christ.
stars within
Black
their
Star
habitable
direct.
zones, then we may have as many as 5 billion planets to search for. 5 billion
No, astea skin-uri, boss.
chances for life. Our Earth, as unique and special and rare as it is, may have billions of siblings. And the Earth is far from alone. With even the beginnings of these searches, astronomers have been able to discover an astounding variety of exoplanets, each of them completely foreign to anything in our own solar system, smashing the expectations of astronomers from generations past. Besides hot Jupiters and their too close for comfort orbits, there are the circumbinary planets,
Damn.
worlds that orbit two
Bă,
stars
da,
at
de ce
once.
n-are și Monster
There are
Hunter
even
așa
double planets,
scheme cu Great
objects of
Sword?
roughly equal mass that orbit a common
Păi,
center.
înapoi la sărac.
Pluto qualified as a planet, it would
Da,
likely
așa că
be
ar trebui
counted
să
as a double
am
planet due to its
ceva.
relationship with Charon. There are rogue planets that wander the interstellar wastes, and Trojan planets that follow a larger sibling in its orbit. There are super
N-am niciun
Earths
skin
and
la
mini
asta, putea mă
Neptunes,
greb la asta.
worlds of every conceivable size, larger than Jupiter and smaller than Mercury. There are worlds covered in ice, in
măcar
lava,
atât.
in thick layers of hydrogen. There are dry
Right.
and airless worlds and ocean-covered water planets. There are planets without cores and planets with almost no crust. There are worlds made of an abundance of carbon, or an abundance of silicon, or an abundance of iron. Decades of searches have
Iron.
unearthed thousands of worlds, which represent only a tiny sliver of those in the Milky Way. But even with that meager sample, we found ourselves continually surprised. It seems that galaxies are enormously efficient at producing planets, and this efficiency may have allowed them to construct planets as early as possible in their histories, and perhaps in the history of the universe. Unfortunately, we do not fully understand the process of planet formation, as it unfolds over the course of hundreds of millions of years. But in addition to fully formed exoplanets, we also have thousands of detailed observations of young stars, protoplanetary disks, and more. We can stitch these collected images together to form the backbone of an overall story, and from there attempt to predict how early planets could have formed in the young universe. Planetary systems like our own begin their lives as diffuse clouds of hydrogen, helium, and a smattering of heavier elements. When these clouds collapse to form a system, most of the material in each of these fragments coalesces towards the center, where friction heats it to high temperatures, becoming a protostar, a star that has not yet ignited fusion in its core. The material eventually forms a flat plane around the protostar, the beginnings of a protoplanetary disk. The vast majority of the disk is made of hydrogen and helium, but sprinkled throughout the swirling chaos is
Sprinkle
dust.
some crack on it, huh?
Microscopic grains of heavier, more complex molecules. Just like the dust that clings irritatingly to the surfaces of your home, the dust in a protoplanetary disk sticks together. Finding each other in the spinning sea of lighter gases, the dust begins to clump, molecule by molecule.
まずクエストを完
Over
成
the
させなく
span
て
of
は
hundreds of thousands of years, these clumps become large enough, roughly 100 meters or so, to completely change the fate of the disk. At roughly this size, the clumps, now known as planetesimals, have a gravitational pull of their own.
私の刃を見るがいい
Size by attracting new material. Within the inner reaches of the disk, near the young star, which has finally begun fusing hydrogen, the heat is too much for light elements like hydrogen and helium to remain, and too much for volatile elements
Ma da
water
to
and carbon
bravo.
dioxide to stay as solid ISIS. Only the heavier elements, like iron, carbon and silicon, and their molecular combinations, survive. The inner
Fuck,
region
man,
of the
that
solar
very
system
plus
therefore
gram,
become
mighty.
the home of terrestrial worlds, and the outer regions form the larger
I'm revived.
gaseous
Ah.
worlds.
Nu știu cum de dam.
This process, repeating generation after generation, star after star,
Dominant
across the
ghost
nearly
mode, what the
countless
fuck?
billions, fills each and every galaxy with a population
これ
of
が失
planets.
敗した悔しさな
So with this picture in mind, it seems that heavy elements are a prerequisite for building planets. And even though planets are numerous, they are small. The Earth, or Jupiter, or any exoplanet may seem enormous to human scales, but they represent mere rounding errors in the cosmic
be some
accounting
fucking
of
weapons.
elements. It is clear that once there is even a small amount of raw material, the simple physics of the universe will give rise to a planet. But how long did it take for the cosmos to generate enough raw material?
Fucking masket, ești pe bune?
Planets do not fare well in the face of a dying star. And the small, rocky world, precariously close to the guest star as it went supernova, was no exception. First came the flood of gamma-ray radiation, stripping away the ozone layer which for billions of years had protected life on their world from the harmful UV radiation of the sun. The oceans overheated, and plants and algae could not withstand the radiation tearing apart the
我こ
heart
そは
of
妖
the
刀
web.
の化身
Then came the high-energy particles known as cosmic rays, ripping through the planet's magnetic field and showering the surface with deadly energies. Cancers of all kinds across all species spread like a global pandemic. And then,
Where's my
centuries
grandson?
later, civilization long crippled
あなたたちの魂のなんて脆いことか
weakened as it expanded out from the initial explosion, but still powerful enough to tear the atmosphere of the planet away like a dandelion seed. Had the supernova pulled their homeworld been any closer, then even the mantle and inner core might have been evaporated in the ensuing blast.
いたずらはやめて
The planet they once called home is dead. The barren husk of rock,
暗闇は
verdant lands and abundant oceans, now dust on a frozen breeze.
切れぬものなし
Was not friendly to life.
行くわよ
Billions of years ago,
あなたたちの魂のなんて脆いことか
were much closer
Oh,
together
it's a charm,
and they
it's a charm.
collided with each other much more frequently. Stars formed in intense
我こそ思わないで
全てが破壊されるのをとくと見よ。
As those stars formed, they also died in
いたずらはやめて
magnificent and frequent supernova explosions, irradiating their vicinity and posing a serious hazard to any life that managed to find a foothold in this hostile era. Thankfully, planets are exceptional.
花が汚れる
のところで
The first stars to emerge in the universe were made entirely of hydrogen, helium, and trace amounts of lithium and beryllium, as those were the only elements fashioned in the fires of the Big Bang. They fused heavier elements in their cores, and even more through their explosive deaths, seeding young galaxies with the ingredients needed to begin building planets. And so, although we do not know when this process first began, we do know it didn't take long. Consider the star TOI 561. TOI 561 is a sun-like star sitting roughly 280 light-years away. As stars go, at first glance, it's pretty unremarkable. It's 79% the mass of the sun and 85% its radius. If you were to see it with your own eyes, it would look just like any other star.
妖刀にかなう相手がいない
TOI 561 isn't just old,
It's in range,
it's
diciamo da.
ancient. It is over twice the age of our sun, having formed roughly 10.5 billion years ago, right when the Milky Way galaxy was first emerging in its own right. And when TOI 561 formed, the Milky Way wasn't nearly as enriched with heavier elements as it is today. And so, in the awkward nomenclature of astronomers, they classify this star as metal poor. TOI 561 is one of the oldest stars to inhabit our galaxy, and in January of 2021, a team of astronomers led by Lauren Weiss at the University of Hawaii in Manoa announced an unexpected discovery.
ちょっといたずらはやめて
Planets. This was confirmed by an independent analysis undertaken by Gaia Batelli of the University of Padua. It was no mere fluke of the data. One of the planets orbiting this ancient star is a super-Earth, weighing twice the mass of our planet on a breakneck orbit.
ちょっといたずらはやめて
The mysteries of its extreme orbit, the mere existence of this world opens up a confusing question. How did a rocky planet, composed of the heavier elements of the periodic table, form around a star with barely any of the elements? This question still lingers on, with no clear resolution. For decades, astronomers had assumed that stars like planets still have a star has a higher abundance of heavier elements to be able to fashion more and larger worlds. It seems that the cosmos has designs of its own. Despite its age, TOI 561 was still able to grow a healthy planetary system with more than enough material for rocky, Earth-like planets. Of course, it doesn't seem likely that the super-Earth that orbits this ancient star is a viable home for life, as it is currently roasting in the ferocious heat of its parent star due to extreme proximity.
全てを終わらせる
Earths could form around TOI 561 10.5 billion years ago, then it's not a great stretch of the imagination to argue that regular Earth
ちょっと
could
修
have
復させ
formed
て
around the same time. Life first appeared on the Earth almost as soon as our surface cooled and the oceans and continents arose. It seems as if once our planet could support life, it did. And so perhaps some world amongst the trillions yet to be mapped, observed or discovered around a stellar cousin of TOI 561 had just the right combination of elements, temperatures and conditions for life to arise. If that life followed the same evolutionary pathway as life did on Earth, spending billions of years as single-celled organisms, transforming the atmosphere to make it more hospitable and laying down the genetic building blocks for an explosion in complexity, leading to the emergence of intelligence, then a star-faring species could have evolved while our own solar system was nothing more than a tenuous cloud of gas and dust floating in interstellar space. Life in the early universe would have been challenging. The cosmos was simply more active and more volatile billions of years ago, resulting in higher rates of star formation and stellar death, soaking every galaxy in more high-energy
刀に
radiation.
力がみなぎ
Indeed,
ったわ
planets may have quickly formed around most stars, but any life that may have emerged on these worlds would have had to navigate the ultimate catastrophe, the supernova explosion of their own sun. Simulations of planets around supernova suggest that they do not fare well in the face of such enormous conditions. Best, the dense nickel and iron cores
ちょ
remain.
っと待ってて全てを終わらせる
Atmosphere, oceans and mantle evaporating in the blast. And yet, once again, nature gives us a surprising twist. Just like the apparent impossibility of hot Jupiters, planets should not exist around pulsars, which are the leftover cores of giant stars that survived after the supernova explosion. But our very first known exoplanet was found orbiting a pulsar. We do not yet fully understand how planets can find themselves living around a dead star. One theory is that they have always been there, but that is unlikely, since giant stars, the kind of stars that go supernova, are very hot and boil off their protoplanetary disks before planet formation can really get going. Another idea is that planets form around pulsars from the supernova material itself. After initially blasting off at a fraction of the speed of light, much of the material cools off and coalesces around the neutron star, introducing a fresh new round of planet formation. These kinds of ideas highlight just how easy planet formation really is. It can even happen around a dead star. And so we can guess that rocky planet formation happened in the extremely early universe, perhaps within the first billion years of cosmic history, as soon as enough generations of stars lived and died to enrich the interstellar gas clouds with heavy elements.
全てが破壊されるのをとくと見よ。
Certain, it certainly had a chance on these earth worlds. Despite the chaos raging through their vibrant emerging galaxies, planets almost certainly formed susceptible. Roots of life were likely snuffed out by an energetic explosion or gravitational destabilization. The universe made planets in abundance, and it's very likely that somewhere, billions of years ago, when the first stars and galaxies began to fill the cosmos with light, some creature called one of those primordial worlds. But so far, we've only considered rocky worlds. Terrestrial planets like our Earth fashioned out of heavier elements with oceans of liquid water. Life may be far stranger than we imagine, and so too, planets life calls home. If we are willing to extend our definition of planet, we might just be able to go back into the depths of time even further.
Stop him.
The world that had known only darkness. The object is known as ARIGATO, a word from the Powhatan language of the Tidewater region of the eastern United States. The language became extinct in the 1700s, but the word is still remembered today, meaning either sky or cloud. ARIGATO sits in the Kuiper Belt region of the solar system, a distant and lonely ring of scattered, frozen leftovers from our system's formation. It is small, grey and dirty. Two misshapen lumps of ice and dust roughly 36 kilometers long and 15 to 20 kilometers on a side, glued together by a gentle bump billions of years ago.
The fuck?
The object has only ever been visited once, in a flyby lasting mere minutes by NASA's New Horizons spacecraft, a project led by Alan Stern and launched in 2009. We only know one face of ARIGATO. The flyby did not last long enough to get view, and the probe was travelling far too quickly and carried too little fuel to park itself into orbit. But in this little object is written a story of miracles. For ARIGATO, present when the protoplanetary disk of our solar system first coalesced. Escaping from the fringes during the chaotic era of the first planetesimals, it watched as new planets emerged out of the swirling maelstrom, crashing and colliding, forming anew, some being ejected into the interstellar wastes as the survivors. Planets, 2 gas giants and 2 ice giants rearranged themselves into a series of orbits. And ARIGATO waited.
I like that sword.
Billions upon billions of years, knowing nothing more than the dim and distant light of the sun and its feeble but persistent gravitational grip. One foot in the solar system, and the other raised towards the stars beyond. And then a little spacecraft, no bigger than a piano, sped by. Its first visitor in the ages since its formation. But before ARIGATO could even register the presence of New Horizons, like radar signals bouncing off its surface or the minute reflections of its gravitational influence, was gone. And so Arakoth resumed its watch for the century at the gates of the
い
solar
たずら
system.
はやめて。くるみは騙されないの。
This represents
Prince,
just a
Prince,
lonely
poi.
outpost in our solar system.
終わりなき大厄災が
Dawaj, Prince.
A planet barely noticeable in the cosmic scene. But it's much easier for the universe to make small clumps of debris like Arakoth than it is to make massive
Budem,
planets.
to jest taki żart, frate, la
For
tot.
giants like Jupiter. Objects like Arakoth are more likely to survive catastrophes that might befall their system, like the death of a giant planet or the collision of the sun.
私こそ理事。
Something else.
痛に満ちた顔で震えおののけ
The objects of the
ちょっと修復
Kuiper
させ
Belt
て。
are made of relatively simple, common elements like hydrogen, carbon, silicon, and
Bine că am
oxygen.
păstrat ultimata aia că mă
Hydrogen was
stresa rău.
made in abundance within the first few minutes of the Big Bang, so that's easy enough. Carbon and oxygen were fused in the hearts of stars the size of the Sun and larger. Silicon is only made in larger stars, but those stars were exceptionally common in the early universe. The following is pure conjecture, but is based on our latest understanding of star formation. The first stars appeared in the universe when it was only a few hundred million years old. That's how long it took for gravity to do its work on the primordial clouds of hydrogen and helium and collapse them enough to trigger nuclear fusion. It would take many generations of stellar births and deaths to enrich the interstellar gas clouds enough to form significant active planets. But something like Arakoth, or its Kuiper-Belt siblings, could have formed much earlier, perhaps in the first handful of stellar generations. Before the first galaxy arose, the first giant black hole arose, and the cosmos
竜王の怒りを持ち
lonely bumps of newborn stars. People went flickering for the first
What the
time.
fuck, what the fuck.
ちょっと修復させ
One
て。
star, somewhere, forever beyond our detection or reach, found itself surrounded by a thin, overplanetary disk.
すべてを終わらせる。
Trace amounts of heavy elements, an object like Arakoth could have formed with the cold fringes of the system. First, substantial body composed of rock and ice. First,
穴に力がみなぎったわ。
main object in the Kuiper Belt of proper planet, some of them are classed as
ひるむものなし。
dwarf planets. May it be such a dwarf planet, first formed in an age before even galaxies had evolved. It is unlikely this first dwarf planet
暗闇は
すべてを終わらせる。
only remains solid far from the light of the star.
旅にしてくれる。
There is another kind of planet, much larger than any dwarf planet or Kuiper Belt object
Vine apoi.
could have emerged in the early universe that might
行くわ。 すべてを終わらせる。
other Haitian worlds.
これで
全てが破壊されるのをとくと見よ
Mantle of hydrogen and ocean. Presently, these planets are only but astronomers have identified several candidates in the Kepler and test surveys.
切り捨てごめん。ちょっと
Haitian
待って
planets are massive, approaching the size of Neptune. But most of that bulk comes in the form of thick atmospheres. Indeed, these atmospheres can be thick enough that they maintain enough pressure on the surface that liquid water can persist, perhaps as globe-spanning oceans. They may have formed in the extremely early universe, relatively small nuggets of rock enrolled in an ocean of water, buried underneath the dense atmosphere of easily obtainable hydrogen. But the oldest known planet is no super Earth or even Neptune.
すべてを終わら
Jupiter
せ
or
る。
a Haitian world. It's not a fragment or a comet.
これで
Formal
戦場に戻れる。
designation is PSR B1620-26b. Most astronomers call it Methuselah, after the biblical character who lived to be the oldest person. Methuselah was discovered in 2003 by Stein Sigurdsson at Pennsylvania State University in the globular cluster M4. globular clusters themselves are amongst the oldest collections of stars in the galaxy, believed to be remnants of galaxies in their light before they were cannibalized by the Milky Way. Methuselah is a pulsar planet, like the first exoplanet, for once great star. It is huge, weighing over 2.5 times the diameter, orbiting around its star at roughly the same distance as Uranus does.
Dopo se cred că m-a dat un peri, du-te de aia cu
Now,
de
the
aici.
star is not alone. It's also much closer. Pulsar
全てが破壊されるのをとくと見よ。
and the globular cluster it makes for stars in the globular cluster appear at the same time. So what is the uncertainty of Methuselah currently holds the record of the oldest known exoplanet, achieving a present-day age of roughly 12.7 billion years. All pulsar planets, astronomers aren't exactly sure how Methuselah formed. Given its tremendous bulk and its relatively regular distance from the star, most astronomers believe that Methuselah formed around the Sunlight Star on the outskirts of the globular cluster almost 13 billion years ago. The star and its bulky planet then migrated
Nu știu
towards
jocul
the
ăsta abia
center
am are
of
nici cum.
M4. And it's there that the planet witnessed a drama unfold before it. The system likely encountered an old
Monster Hunter
neutron
PvP.
star and its companion star, a common denizen of old clusters like M4. Through gravitational interactions, a dance ensued, with the neutron star capturing the wandering star and ejecting its old companion in the process.
Dăm ceva bun.
Once stabilized, Methuselah's star then aged normally, eventually becoming a red giant. Its swollen atmosphere spilled onto the neutron star, transferring energy and angular momentum and causing the neutron star to spin up to become a pulsar, rotating at a rate of 100 times per second. After
Unavailable,
Methuselah's
bun.
original parent star exits the red giant stage, it
Poți să
becomes
te
a
încadrezi
white
dacă vrei
dwarf.
să joci la ăla,
And
dar
after
e
all, this
unavailable.
drama
Bine,
played
bă.
out,
Ok.
Methuselah remained for billions of years. However, Methuselah itself is an unlikely candidate for life.
Hey,
At
duels
least
are
for life
available.
as we
Really?
currently
Nah,
understand
nah,
it,
just kidding.
just like any other gas giant. The material to make a planet can also make a moon. And a system doesn't need nearly as many raw heavy elements to fashion a series of moons around such a giant. And so, there is a chance,
Bă,
13
am avut
billion
unul...
years ago, that some
Am,
form
în
of
continuare.
life arose in some alien ocean,
Îmi cere tot timpul
buried
exact
under
ce
the
nu am.
globe-spanning ice sheets of
Reușește,
a
tot
moon
timpul.
around
Bă, poți să
Methuselah.
faci aia? Bă, nu pot.
It may
aia am
or may
treabă.
not have
Super.
awakened into consciousness, or pierced the ice sheets to witness the drama of its parent star, or the quiet calm of the billions of years since, or the majesty of the Milky Way, visible in all its resplendent glory from the vantage point of the globular cluster. Indeed, if life did find a home on a moon of Methuselah, it would have been shielded by that ice from the cosmic dangers of the early universe. The radiation from supernova explosions, the heat from the red giant star, could have persisted and even thrived. It may even still be there. The oldest living creatures orbiting the oldest known planet, the end result of a genetic lineage going all the way back to the dawn of stars and galaxies themselves, retaining a memory of a cosmos far unlike our own. If they had eyes and minds filled with curiosity, they could have watched the entire Milky Way emerge and evolve before them. And if they developed telescopes to allow them to peer deeper into that galaxy, they might train their curiosity on a small, insignificant branch of one of the great spiral arms. And in their detailed, careful observations, they might come across a star not unlike the one that once hosted their system. They would find a gas giant, smaller than theirs, but still mighty among its family of planets. And they would detect the thin atmosphere of a water-rich world. And in that atmosphere, the unmistakable sign of that planet's life that has only recently arrived on the galactic scene. You've been watching the entire history of the universe, Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave us a comment to tell us what you think. And thanks again to Novium for sponsoring this video.
私の刃を見るがいい
In the 1970s, astronomers discovered that our Milky Way galaxy is moving. Drawn by great invisible forces, we were being pulled towards something, but we couldn't see what. The final destination was hidden by the zone of avoidance, a region of the sky obscured by gas and dust of
いたず
galactic
らはやめ
disk.
て
Like a tiny raft adrift in a vast ocean on a moonless
ちょっと
night,
待ってて
we were pulled up in the current, heading towards who knows where.
刀が汚れる
We weren't alone. But it wasn't just the Milky Way,
刀に
ocean,
力がみなぎったわ
all of our neighbors. Two astronomers, Arbret Tully and J. Richard Fisher, were using the Parkes
便利じゃ
Radio
ない
Telescope in Australia to conduct a survey of distant galaxies, attempting, with their meager observations, to reconstruct their movements. And around the same time, multiple teams of astronomers were observing the cosmic microwave background, the bath of radiation that survived as a relic from the early days of the Big Bang.
ちょっと修復させ
And
て
independently, both groups found the first hints of this great cosmic flow. The galaxies that Tully and Fisher mapped seem to share a common locus, their reconstructed velocities all roughly pointing in the same direction. As for the cosmic microwave background, its temperature across the sky bias. It was slightly hotter in one direction and slightly cooler in the other. Much of this discrepancy could be eliminated by considering the motion of the Sun around the core of the Milky Way. But even after that subtraction, the residue remained. An extreme motion relative to the ultimate cosmic reference frame. Speed amounting to hundreds of kilometers per second.
ほらほら
It appears as if the Milky Way and all the other galaxies in our nearby vicinity of the cosmos were being drawn to a specific location in the universe as if tied by great invisible chains stretching tens of millions of light years. You couldn't see it, couldn't map it, couldn't figure out what it was. All you could do was simply name it. Attract. To the next level motion, a persistent sink of gravity, a
Kurayami wa
cosmos that
michita.
pulls and pulls and pulls. Our entire galaxy and thousands of others, home to hundreds of billions of stars and countless planets, drawn to the great attractor like helpless moths to a flame. And yet, no matter how odd this may seem, this is not an unusual situation in the cosmos. The universe is far from static. Every object
全てが破壊されるのをとくと見よ。
from the orbit of the Earth around the Sun to the Sun's drift within our galaxy to the hurtling of the Milky Way towards the Great Attractor. And that's not even the largest example in the universe. The Great Attractor turned out to be just the tip of a far grander cosmic iceberg flowing across the sky.
行こう
Vast
ついてるわ
cosmic
ね
structures and motions dwarfing anything we had ever seen before. And so, nothing is still.
ちょっと待ってて
Somewhere. The question is, where? On the 23rd of September 1999, Mars approached the planet. The mission was totally lost, and it later turned out to have been down to a mistake converting metric to imperial units. Even multi-billion-pound projects supposed to work seamlessly.
いたずらはやめて
Frustrating when it comes to stuff you use every day, which is why scientists
私に
today
は通用しません
are a great choice with their everyday earbuds. They are very reliable with a 32-hour battery life, multi-point connectivity to join the two devices at once, and brand new active noise cancellation, so you can even enjoy History of the Universe on long flights without trouble. They've also been great for editing the audio.
刀に力がみなぎったわ
To wear for long periods of time, but it's especially important to keep in the edit when I'm wearing them all day long. and the quality rivals some of the big names in audio, almost half the price. The
便利じゃ
protective
ない
case cover is also a great, stylish bonus and especially useful for me as I'm always losing earbuds. And it supports wireless charging. So head over to buyraycon.com/HOTU today to get 20 to 50% off site-wide. Thanks to Raycon for supporting educational content on YouTube.
行こう
Our universe is defined by
武
motion.
器は治ったわ
One way to describe it is through our increasing awareness and restlessness of the cosmos. For millennia, the brightest scientific minds in Europe and the Middle East believed that
ちょっ
the
と
Earth
修
was
復させて
perfectly still and that the heavens revolved around it. Those early astronomers busied themselves with attempts to explain the motion of other objects. The sun, the moon, each of the known planets, and the stars. And their predictions worked surprisingly well. Their cosmological system of motion wasn't perfect. In fact, it was the only mess, relying on small circle orbits nested with larger ones. Some centered on the Earth, some centered on other points. And so, the Polish astronomer Nakanaka Naraka published On the Revolutions of the Heavenly Spheres, a radical reformulation of the Earth system that put the Sun at the center of the universe, still and motionless, with the Earth set in motion around it, along with all the other planets.
よし
Reaction to the work of Copernicus was
ちょっと
mixed.
修復させ
On
て
one hand, it was a bold reshaping of the universe. On the other, it was arguably just as messy as the ancient system it was trying to replace. And on top of this, it introduced more than a few questions that had no easy answers. First and foremost, if the Earth was moving, how could we
全てを終わらせる
the Earth will go running away? Feel the wind against our face when we run, or watch
ちょっといたずらはやめて
feel a great rush of wind as the Earth orbits around the Sun? Or why aren't we running across the void of space into an incredible planet? It took centuries of science and the development of Isaac Newton's theory of gravity for the full picture to come together. Today we know that we don't feel the motion of the Earth because we are in motion
ちょっと修復させ
with
て
it. Since the vacuum of space is just that, a vacuum, there's nothing for us to push against to betray that motion. And so how can we guarantee that the Earth truly is in motion? Is there a standard reference? Indeed, Newton assumed that such a standard existed, that there was a fixed frame of universal reference from which all motion could be measured. In quantum relativity, Einstein rejected the concept of a fixed universal ruler against which we could judge all motion. Instead, all inertial motion was relative. The only way to measure motion is in reference to something else. And from this
刀に力がみなぎったわ
fundamental idea, the rest of relativity blossoms. The
かぎ
fabric
縄
of
がない
space-time, the equivalence of mass and energy, the limitations of the speed of light, all of it. Imagine cruising in an
修復させて
unpowered rocket ship and encountering your friend doing the same in the opposite direction. You're both in an inertial frame of reference,
さっきは
moving at a fixed speed.
危なかったわ
As you cross paths, you will notice there that you are moving and they stay put. In relativity, they have just as equal right to state that they are moving. You are the one that is standing still.
ちょっと
These
修
two
復させて
perspectives are equally valid. Despite this, we can accept that the Earth is spinning because each body of it is force, which twists their screens around and form harmonies and rings. So even if our skies were completely
暗闇
少しのリージ
measure except for what's right in front of us, we can still deduce the motion and rotation of the Earth. But the movement of the Earth throughout the greater universe is another matter altogether. For that, we need to identify some other yardsticks.
全てを終わらせる
Otherwise, we can simply claim, just like any other object in the universe, that we are motionless, and that the rest of the cosmos, every planet and star and galaxy,
ちょっと修
全てが
復させて
破壊されるのをとくと見よ。
and thankfully, the universe itself gives us exactly the tools we need.
これで戦場に
The
戻れ
trick
る
is that we don't live in a static universe, but an expanding one. The cosmos changes from day to day. In the past it was smaller, and in the future it will be larger. And it is this that allows us to write down a preferred frame of reference, one that expands along with the universe, allowing us to measure motion relative to that. In other words, at large scales, the universe is expanding. On average, galaxies are getting farther away from each other with time. We can then define motion on top of that general expansion. Anything that deviates from the general outward flow of the universe is special and unique. In the parlance of cosmology, this is known as peculiar velocity, and these velocities can range from 200 to 2,000 kilometers per second. And mathematically, cosmologists use one of the rotation of the Earth, the orbit of our planet around the Sun, the movement of our solar system within the galaxy.
我こそは陽光の化身ちょっと待ってて
And so without even feeling it, without even taking a single step, you will move an incredible distance.
ちょっと
Light.
いたずらはやめて
First, there is the rotation of the Earth. Depending on where you sit on the globe, you could be whipping around at up to 1,600 kilometers every hour. Of course, if you happen to be standing on either geographic pole, your rotational velocity will be exactly zero. For most of humanity, which lives somewhere in the mid-latitudes between the poles and the equator, typical everyday velocity is around 1,000 kilometers per hour. For a typical human lifetime of around 80 years, or 700,000 hours, that gives a lifetime movement of around 1 billion kilometers, just due to the rotation of the Earth. But the Earth is also orbiting the Sun with an average speed of 30 kilometers per second. Over your lifetime, that adds up to around another 80 billion kilometers of total movement. Though of course,
いたずらはやめて
motion. Sun, along with all the planets, asteroids, comets, and all the other denizens of the solar system, moves within a Milky Way. Most of that motion is a simple orbit around the galactic center, a journey that takes 230 million years to complete a single revolution. But in that time, the Sun travels an enormous distance, giving it an average speed of around 230 kilometers per second.
武器は治ったわ
Interestingly, that number is also profound evidence for the existence of dark matter within the Milky Way. And the average mass of all the luminous objects within the orbit of the Sun, even including generous allowances for stars and clumps of gas that we can't directly
ちょ
observe,
っと修
there
復さ
still
せて
isn't nearly enough material to keep the Sun in a steady orbit. If there was no additional source of mass, the Sun's current speed should ensure that it would have been completely ejected from the Milky Way billions of years ago. But yet the Sun is still here, still orbiting, chained to the Milky Way by some invisible form of matter. Dark matter, that blends the great galaxy and brings everything together. In addition to its orbit around the center, the Sun also lazily bulbs up and down, falling in the dark ocean, vital to the unstable gravitational influences of all of its neighbors. Over the course of millions of years, the Sun rises thousands of miles above the galactic
終わりなき大厄災が来る
reaching
だ
a minimum and starting the cycle anew. Currently, the Sun is plunging through a region known as the local bubble, a cavity blown out of the interstellar medium by a supernova detonation that went off millions of years ago. This bubble has a density less than 1/10 the average for the Milky Way, which is already low enough that it would register as a vacuum in a laboratory on Earth. Our solar system entered the bubble somewhere between 5 and 10 million years ago, and will continue to cross its 1,000 light-year expanse for millions of years to come. And yet that is far from the end of it. For against the backdrop of the expansion of the universe, our galaxy is also on the move. And it's headed right for our nearest neighbor. Billions of years from now, our sky will be unrecognizable. The moon will be smaller, fainter, and more distant. The sun will be larger and brighter. All the familiar constellations will be gone, replaced with a new generation of stars in our solar neighborhood. And in that nighttime sky, one singular object will reign supreme, greater in majesty than any nebula, star, or planet. The Andromeda Galaxy. Right now, Andromeda is large, but not noticeably so, taking up as much of the sky as a fist held at arm's length. Within 2.5 billion years, however, Andromeda will dominate our nights, almost completely filling the sky. And it will not look like the Andromeda that we know today. In the far future, it will be distorted, its previously simple shape twisted by tremendous forces of gravity as it begins to entangle with the Milky Way. A billion years after that, the sky-filling Andromeda will be ablaze with giant stars as the gravitational interactions between the two galaxies will ignite a new round of star formation. And it will be billions of years after that, long after our sun has breathed its last, that the merger process between Andromeda and the Milky Way will end.
Nu, să scomeniu
Core
ăla
of this
de
new
arată
galaxy will
butanele.
glow with ghostly prominence in the sky, brighter than any other nighttime object. If our planet survives huddled against the meager glow of our sun's white dwarf, we will see the sky slowly fade, first into redness, and then finally, as the last of the visible stars disappear, into blackness. It was in the 1920s that Edwin Hubble made the remarkable discovery that the Andromeda Nebula, which had long befuddled astronomers, was actually an island universe in its own right, an entire galaxy sitting 2.5 million light-years away, over 10 times more distant than the furthest object astronomers had hypothesized could exist. But measuring the speed of Andromeda was not a straightforward exercise. Andromeda is simply too big. Training a telescope on it only revealed a small portion, with wildly different velocity measurements. And so it took until 1957 for the Dutch astronomer Henrik van der Hulst to finally provide a robust number. He examined the faint radiation emitted by neutral hydrogen, something known as 21 centimeter radiation. With careful radio measurements, astronomers like van der Hulst could build up crude maps of the chemical signals sent out by this neutral hydrogen and examine any shifts in its spectrum. A redshift from the expected wavelength would indicate movement away from us, while a blue shift would indicate towards us. And it was via this method that van der Hulst arrived at an average speed of minus 296 kilometers per second, with an uncertainty of around 20%. Clear indication that Andromeda is moving towards us. But to further complicate matters, that measurement didn't just include the motion of the galaxy moving together, but also the movement of the sun around the galactic center. That must be subtracted to give the true galactic motion. That number is right around 100 kilometers per second. But of course, if you know the number, there is we could say that the Milky Way is still, and that Andromeda is just water, or that the Milky Way is rapidly escaping at a great speed. But in the frame of reference with respect to the expansion of the universe, our two galaxies are actually both moving towards each other, heading towards the common gravitational center. But this motion didn't necessarily mean that we would definitely. Astronomers can typically only measure the radial motion of a galaxy, velocity pointing either towards us or away from us. Lateral or side-to-side motion is much more difficult to measure. Indeed, it wasn't until 2012 when a team of astronomers led by Sangmo Sohn used the Hubble Space Telescope to measure the velocities of thousands of stars within Andromeda that we had our first clear picture of its true three-dimensional course. And it was then that we realized we really were on a collision course. The fun begins in as little as 2 billion years. As our galaxies draw closer, their immense gravitational interactions will begin to distort and reshape them. The cause is the same physics that governs the ocean tides on the Earth. Parts of each galaxy that are nearest to each other will receive a stronger gravitational pull than the rest, while the part on the opposite side will receive the weakest gravitational pull. Stretch each galaxy. Sometimes entire spiral arms can detach from a galaxy, causing a phenomenon known as the tidal tail, an expanse of intense star formation stretching tens of thousands of light years. And between the galaxies, a bridge of gas and stars often develops, as if the galaxies are reaching for each other. But when the merger event finally happens in roughly 5 billion years, it will not be like a sudden car crash. Most of the volume of the galaxy is into space, nothing more than a thin spread of plasma stretched between the stars. While the gas tangles up on itself, forming shock fronts and complex waves of disturbances, the stars simply pass by like two giant swarms of bees. But that doesn't mean that the stars will go unharmed. In the midst of a galaxy merger, stars will come dangerously close to each other. Not enough to pair off and merge together, but more than close enough to disrupt their orbits. In short, everything will become chaos. The flat plane of the galactic disks replaced with a tangled mess of complex, overlapping orbits. Most stars will survive in this new reality. Of energy from nearby encounters flung away in their galactic homes forever. The first merger pass will take more than 100 million years to complete and will repeat several times over a few 100 million years. With each cycle of collision, interaction and separation shorter. Indeed, each one of these interactions will lead to a fresh round of star formation as gas compresses and fragments. At its peak, the star formation process in the merged galaxy reached over 1,000 times its present-day rate. And so, at each moment, the merged galaxy adorned with cities of neon stars, blazing bright white energies of powered collision. But then, sadly, comes the tragic end. Galaxies have only a limited supply of gas to turn into new generations of stars. Left alone, a galaxy like the Milky Way can steadily sip on its reserves for over 100 billion years. But the act of the collision burns far too hot, quickly depleting reservoir after reservoir of gas in the intense rounds of star formation. Once those stars burn out, there will be relatively little left to form new ones, and the only remaining stars within the galaxy will be the long-lived dwarf stars. The merged galaxy. Some astronomers call it more Commodore to become a giant elliptical, a large thunderboid, incapable of substantial star formation, used to half the day watching its population of stars drop one by one. This is all hypothetical. Our best guess as to how this massive event will unfold. Some of the most recent simulations have raised the possibility that it may not happen for another 8 billion years, if at all. Astronomers can't watch galaxy mergers play out in real time. The process takes hundreds of millions of years to complete. Instead, what we have is snapshots. The beginning of a merger here, or the end result there. A kaleidoscope of catastrophes caused. Take the nice galaxies, a pair of interacting galaxies sitting 290 million light-years away. So named because their long tidal tails make them look like two mice nestled together, the galaxies have just begun the merger process and the ensuing gravitational distortions. And in 2023, astronomers used the James Webb Space Telescope to observe ARP 220, a pair of galaxies caught mid-merger sitting 250 million light-years away. The merger triggered a round of star formation so intense that the galaxy now shines over 100 times brighter than the Milky Way. But already star formation has shut off. What we are currently seeing is the aftermath of the already ignited stars. Throughout the universe, astronomers have chunks of galaxies interacting in a variety of different ways. Some turn head-on, and others just glance in front of each other. Sometimes they're perpendicular, and sometimes slamming their arms against each other. Sometimes moving through the struggle with gravitational dominance.
ずらはやめて
So, the process of galaxy mergers began billions of years ago. Even before the galaxies themselves arose, and continues to the future. For the journey of the Milky Way does not end with merging with Andromeda. Our motion through the universe
周囲早く
is
して
over, and it's toward the direction
全てを終わらせる
we stand.
これで戦場に戻れる
Sometimes mathematics can be a crystal ball that lets the careful observer peer through the distant reaches of space and time. Sometimes that crystal ball begins its own story in a space and time far, far removed from modern-day cosmology. Take the wide-reaching consequences of the work of the French mathematician Gaspard Monge. Instead, as Minister of the Navy in Revolutionary France, in
いたずらはやめて
problems goods. Several decades later, the great pioneer André Marie Ampère took Monge's work and expanded on it, generating equations that have since found use in a variety of economic settings. For example, in figuring out the most efficient way to move resources between mines and factories. And in the midst of World War II,
便利じゃない。
Soviet mathematician Leonid Kantorovich took the work of Monge and Ampère to the next level, extending and applying their equations to the thorny logistical problems faced by the Soviet war machine. But finally, in a beautiful example of the universality of physics, in the 1970s, Canadian-American cosmologist Jim Peebles proved the same equation was used to describe the efficient movement of mass in the assembly of formation.
いたずらはやめて
Coming from a humble background, son of a grain exchange worker and filmmaker, Jim would go on to study at Princeton University, and eventually become a pioneer in the field of cosmology. Though in the early days of his research in the 1960s, cosmology was not widely considered a serious field of study. He knew that the universe was expanding, and that everything was likely to rest. There was so little observational data available that most But Jim pushed on and pioneered almost every aspect of modern physical cosmology, from the growth of structure to the earliest moments of the Big Bang, work that would earn him a Nobel Prize in Physics in 2019. And completing the circle, it was two astronomers,
Next level of
the French
Periola,
Roy
some
Mahai
Bakula,
and the
Dakar,
Russian
Buzut.
Andrei Sobolevsky, who followed up on Jim's pioneering work and finally turned the so-called Monge-Ampère-Kantorovich equations into a cosmological crystal ball. They found that they could take the present-day positions of galaxies and combine that with limited information on their velocities to transport these galaxies back in time. The trick
Dai seama
behind
pula
this
mea
approach
că
is that we know how galaxies move.
de cât timp există tot.
They're
Și cât o
influenced
să
by
mai
their
existe
mutual
după noi.
gravitational attraction, and we know how gravity works. So this technique allows cosmologists to take the current state of a collection of galaxies and compute where they should have been in the past. It's not perfect by any means. Every step backwards in time introduces ever larger uncertainties, and the technique can't go all the way back to the Big Bang, but it does work. With this method, Brent Tully, who first identified the beginnings of the Great Attractor, and his collaborators have released continuously updated catalogues called Cosmic Flows, which map out tens of thousands of galaxies around the Milky Way, along with their positions billions of years ago. This information allows him and his colleagues to reconstruct the motions of galaxies through cosmic time, not just into the past, but into the future,
まずク
giving
エス
them
ト
the
を完
ability
成
to
させなく
predict
ては
where the Milky Way is headed. And it's through this technique, a
Fucking
combination
gay.
of intense, careful observations and clever mathematical crystal balls, that we can finally understand the shape and influence of the Great Attractor and what our ultimate fate in the universe will be. The expansion of the universe allows us to construct a preferred frame of reference from which we can judge all motion, its movement relative to the general expansion flow. We can therefore create detailed velocity maps of nearby galaxies to attempt to ascertain that general flow. Laborious and error-prone exercise.
Oh.
However, thankfully, the universe itself gives us a snapshot of that cosmological reference frame. For confirmation of the Great Attractor's existence came not from maps of local galaxies, but from the ultimate source of light in the entire universe, the cosmic microwave background. The CMB was generated when the universe was roughly 380,000 years old, when the transition from a hot, dense plasma to a less hot, dense gas the cosmos with radiation.
Move direct,
That
frate.
radiation has two very useful properties. One is actually everywhere. Every single cubic centimeter of space participated in the creation of the CMB. The formation of the CMB is relatively brief, in the order of 10,000 years. So the CMB is responsible for the vast majority of photons in the universe, and we can see it in all directions in the sky. Everywhere you go in the universe, you'll always see the CMB. And secondly, the CMB is almost perfectly uniform, with deviations in temperature no bigger than roughly 1 part in a million, a reflection of the nearly pure homogeneity of the early universe. This means that we are surrounded on all sides by radiation that is almost perfectly smooth, and was created in a singular moment in the distant past. It is a measurable snapshot of the cosmological reference frame. Any movement within the universe relative to that frame will distort our image of the CMB. It will appear blue-shifted in our direction of motion and red-shifted away from our direction of motion. And that's exactly what we observe. The CMB is hotter by about 0.0035 Kelvin in the direction of the constellation Leo, and colder by that same amount in the direction of the constellation Aquarius. The only way to explain this temperature discrepancy, known as a dipole, is by our motion relative to the CMB, and hence cosmological frame of reference. To get this measured shifting, our speed must be somewhere around 600 kilometers per second. Of course, some portion of that velocity is due to the Sun's orbit around the center of the Milky Way, and some is due to our inevitable collision with Andromeda. But even after subtracting that, it's still less about 300 kilometers per second. Now, the direction of that the orbit of the Sun will merge a part of the Milky Way straight towards it.
Bă, iară mă da dezarmă, du-te în morții, mătii.
The grand circle around the universe, billions of billions of years of restless the way started out small. And through successive mergers amassed itself to its present-day status. This same story has played out trillions of times across the visible universe, galaxy after galaxy. This is the theory of hierarchical structure formation. How the universe built itself from brick and solitary brick. And so there are hierarchies of structure in the universe. Galaxies, groups, clusters, and superclusters. Along with that hierarchy of structure comes a hierarchy of movement. The galaxies are already assembled from countless mergers in the past. Groups, like the local groups that contains the Milky Way, Andromeda, Triangulum, and a host of smaller dwarf galaxies, are still in the process of collapse and merger. Indeed, roughly 100 billion years after the Milky Way and Andromeda meet each other, the other members of the local group will collapse in with them, forming a single mega-galaxy. These groups of galaxies, trekking along through the expanses of the universe towards their local centers of gravitational attraction, the clusters of galaxies. The nearest cluster to us is the Virgo cluster, being home to thousands of galaxies and drawing tens of thousands more towards it. In addition to the motion of the Milky Way towards Andromeda, as a group, we are also falling towards Virgo. The process was set in motion during the early around a few billion years ago. As clusters like Virgo grew, they exerted more gravitational influence on their surroundings. This pulled more material onto them, which increased their mass and increased their gravity. Long ago, the nascent Virgo cluster started weakly tugging on the local group, And as the cluster
とって
grew,
もレアなアイ
a
テムに
gentle
見えるわ
tug turned into a mighty force. And this growth of gravity does not just stop at the scale of clusters, though clusters are the largest gravitationally bound structures in the universe. For the clusters themselves participate in yet another level of growth, one that is not quite finished: the building of superclusters. Superclusters have always had a loose definition in astronomy, usually referring to anything vaguely resembling a coherent structure on scales larger than clusters. As far back as 1863, astronomers William and John Herschel noted an obsessed number of nebulae, galaxies in the direction of the Virgo cluster. In the 1950s, the astronomer Gérard de Vaucouleurs tentatively identified this excess of galaxies as a structure in its own right, calling it the local supergalaxy, which he later changed to local supercluster. But because superclusters are not yet fully assembled, it's not easy to find limits or boundaries. Initially, astronomers believed that the Virgo cluster sat as part of the local supercluster, also conventionally known as the Virgo supercluster. Around 100 galaxy groups and individual clusters span over 100 million clusters. In 2014, Fred Tull, along with collaborators Hélène Courtois, Yehuda Hoffman, and Daniel Red, proposed a new definition of supercluster. This definition was not based on spatial extent, but on movement. They employed the Mont-Jean-Pierre Cantarovic reconstruction technique to bring their galaxy surveys into life, changing them from static snapshots of the present-day universe into living entities, enabling them to see where these tens of thousands of galaxies near to us came from, and discern where they're going. And it was the motions of these galaxies that revealed the true extent of our local supercluster. It turned out what we thought was a supercluster was just a single branch, core of a much larger assembly. An entity that Tully and his collaborators named Laniakea, a Hawaiian word that roughly translates to immense heaven or open sky. And so the Milky Way galaxy belongs to the local group that's really moving towards a common center, which will eventually become a gigantic singular galaxy. The local group belongs to the Virgo branch of our supercluster, as we're all headed towards the Virgo cluster. And the Virgo supercluster branch belongs to Laniakea, because we're all moving towards the center of Laniakea. 100,000 galaxies in total, spanning across over 300 million light-years in length, assembled in 4 separate branches, each one considered superclusters in their own right, all headed for a single destination: the beating heart of Laniakea, the local center of attraction of this portion of the universe, the final assembly point of a construction process that began
fucking well out of that.
and will take hundreds of years to complete. The center of it all, the Great Attractor. Our portrait of the Great Attractor is hazy at best, because it lies within the zone of avoidance, the direction in the universe obscured by our own galaxy's dust. But some wavelengths of light can penetrate that dust, and surveys taken with radio, infrared, and X-ray have shown us glimpses of what lies beyond the veil, and what might be sitting within the Great Attractor's region. As best we can tell, the heart of Laniakea, the focal point for the great migration of 100,000 galaxies, including the Milky Way, is the Norma cluster, named for the constellation we must peer through to see it. It is several times larger than a typical galaxy cluster, and sits about 220 million light-years away from us. And so even at a speed of over 100 kilometers per second, the Norma cluster is so far away that our journey towards it would take over 100 billion years. Norma began life just like any other galaxy cluster, the result of countless mergers and relentless gravitational attraction. But it happened to sit at the bottom of an immense gravitational well, the single point of attraction for this entire local region of the universe. Indeed, over time, Norma will only grow more immense as it continues to collect more material within it. The recent survey, again using the Jean-Pierre Kantorovich reconstruction technique, have revealed that our motion towards the great attractor, that is, the Norma cluster, is still not the end of the story. For one, even though our understanding of Norma is vague at best, it appears to be a little too small. Even adding in the contribution of its dark matter, Norma's gravitational pull is not quite large enough to account for the speed with which we are moving towards the great attractor. In other words, the great attractor isn't quite as great as it initially appeared. There seems to be an additional source of attraction sitting even further beyond the Norma cluster, for Norma too appears to be in motion. An entity even larger, even greater than the great attractor, sitting over 650 million light-years away. The structure was first observed by Harlow Shapley of the Harvard College Observatory in 1930, who could only dimly perceive a distant nebulosity. But we now know it to be another supercluster, the next nearest neighbor to our own Laniakea, and from what we can tell, a supercluster even larger than our own. The incredible mass of the Shapley supercluster is influencing every galaxy, every group, and every cluster around it for hundreds of millions of light-years. Indeed, if we were to give the universe enough time for all this motion to continue unabated, the Laniakea would transform into a single compact object, a much more immense version of the Norma cluster that currently sits at its heart. That object would eventually make its way to the sun, situated at the center of the Shapley supercluster. And there are even hints of additional motion on a greater scale.
課長空気を落としちゃう
In
なんて
2008, NASA astronomer Alexander Kishlinsky was observing a subtle signal found in the cosmic microwave
ちょっ
background.
と修復させて
Known as the kinematic Senyayev-Zelgovich effect, it's a tiny imprint caused when light from the CMB passes through a galaxy cluster on its way towards us.
回復中
By comparing that signal with the
Gotcha.
sky,
Thank you.
we found
Gotcha,
there
Nante.
appeared to be a large flow of clusters towards the direction on our sky between the constellations Centaurus and Vela. This apparent dark flow, Kishlinsky nicknamed it,
ちょっと
between 600 and 1,000 kilometers per second, faster than our own motion towards the great attractor. And that
ちょっと
motion
修復
makes
さ
up a
せて
significant portion of clusters in the universe. And the intriguing puzzle with this dark flow is that the differences in density in the universe aren't large enough to explain the velocity. There simply isn't enough material collected together in any one patch of the universe to explain such large-scale, coherent motion. Although, in 2013, scientists at the ESA's Planet satellite found no evidence of dark flow. Debate continues.
出るものなしそうよサビにしてくれる
Whether this dark flow was a real feature of our cosmos or not, there are still reverberations echoing
花が汚れる
past. When the universe was only a few 100,000 years old, it was over 1 million times smaller than it is today. All its material was compressed into a hot, dense plasma. Like any plasma, sound waves crashed and echoed within it as waves of density surged back and forth. And these sound waves are varying acoustic oscillations. When the universe expanded and cooled, it transitioned from a plasma to a neutral gas, releasing the cosmic microwave background. And at that moment, the baryonic acoustic oscillations were frozen in place, trapped in whatever position and state they were in when the plasma dissipated. These oscillations persisted as tiny
とってもレアな
fluctuations
アイ
in
テムに見えるわ
density, series of overlapping shells of slightly higher density than their surroundings. Over time, along with the rest of the universe, they grew, accumulating more matter than average, and after hundreds of millions of years, more galaxies
これ
than
で戦
average.
場に戻れる
And today, cosmologists map the imprint of the acoustic oscillations in massive surveys of galaxies, using them to test models of the history of the universe. And in 2023,
とってもレアなアイ
Brent
テムに見え
Tully,
るわ
Colin Howlett, and Daniel Pomered discovered that many nearby
全
clusters
てが破壊されるのをとくと見よ
arranged in the shape of a
ほ
shell.
らほら
The radius of this shell is over 400 million light years, and it includes elements like the Sloan Great Wall, the CFA Great Wall, and the Hercules Complex, all centered in the Virotes supercluster, all enormous entities in their own right. Tully and collaborators believe that is an individual baryonic acoustic oscillation, the plasma era of the universe, still echoing today. Appropriately enough, they named it Hoyo, taken from a portion of a Hawaiian creation chant, meaning from deep darkness came murmurs of awakening. And finally, reverberations of ages past are not the only forces at play. The gravity of Andromeda, the gravity of the Virgo cluster, the gravity of the Great Attractor, the gravity of the Shapley supercluster, the gravity of Ho'olilana. But there are also pushes, sources not of attraction, but of repulsion. Adding up all the known sources of mass in the wider universe, as deep and as far as our galaxy surveys will reveal to us, is still not enough to fully account for the motion of the Milky Way galaxy. There appears to be something else. Something on the opposite side of the sky of the Shapley supercluster. Something that we have not yet fully mapped or understood. A great, tall, vast, one of many that dominate the volume of the universe. Named the Dipole Repeller Void, we do not yet have an accurate understanding of its shape, size, or dimensions. All we know, it seems to participate in the great movement of divine light in a large-scale unravel the cosmic web and prevent us from ever reaching the Great Attractor. It was perhaps the only time that Einstein didn't trust his own mathematics. Early in his career, he had made a name for himself with his leaps of imagination and insight, grounded in a deep understanding of the physical universe and the mathematics needed to bring his ideas to light. Indeed, in a single year, he crafted the special theory of relativity, discovered a foundational principle of quantum mechanics, and conclusively demonstrated the existence of atoms. But in 1917, Einstein tripped over himself. He had just developed general relativity and found numerous applications for it, and so decided to take these newfound equations and use them to describe the entire universe. After all, gravity is the only force that operates at large scales across all objects, and so the language of general relativity should have been more than capable of describing the evolution of the cosmos. Yet what he found surprised him. His equations naturally predicted a dynamic universe, one that was always in motion, with all objects at large scales. This went against the conventional wisdom at the time, that while planets may orbit and stars may move here and there, the large-scale universe was fixed and static for all eternity. And so, for whatever reason, Einstein didn't want to disrupt the established order, and he found an opportunity in the form of a cosmological constant, a number that he could slip into his equations without breaking them. In the solar system, this cosmological constant didn't affect any measurements, but on large scales, it would act to stabilize the universe, overcoming the natural tendency of objects in the cosmos to move. Unfortunately for this idea, just a few years later, Edwin Hubble would discover the expansion of the universe. While Einstein never admitted it, in public or in any letter, his closest friends recalled that he would refer to the cosmological constant as his greatest blunder. Yet despite Einstein's regret, the constant never quite went away. Eventually, the great Soviet astrophysicist Yakov Zeldovich recognized its importance when he equated the cosmological constant to the vacuum energy of space-time. Just two different expressions of the same fundamental concept.
とってもレアなアイテムに見えるわ。
Astronomers realized that the expansion of the universe was accelerating. The most likely culprit for this mysterious accelerated expansion, the vacuum energy of space-time. And so in the span of only a few weeks, cosmologists around the world dusted off their history books and reacquainted themselves with Einstein's greatest blunder, and how that little innocent term in the equations
私の刃を見るがいい。
the Little Gate, the Virgo cluster, the Laniakea supercluster, they were all built atom by atom, galaxy by galaxy. They took billions of years of slow and steady movement to reach their current stunning grandeur. While the rest of the universe may be continuing to get bigger, and galaxies gently drifting away with the Hubble flow, the galaxies of Laniakea should always have been able to call it home. Until its dark energy hit the balance. 5 billion years ago, the expansion of the universe to a point where a new force could emerge triumphant. That force was always there, waiting in the shadows, part of the very fabric of space-time. But it was weak, and so it sat in the background, content to let the forces of radiation and matter dominate the evolution of the cosmos, until its time finally came. We still don't definitively understand what dark energy is. We merely know what it's doing. It's causing the expansion of the
これが
universe,
失敗した悔しさな。
and its influence is only growing. As the universe expands, its matter contents get more and more spread out. But that same expansion creates more dark energy. Whatever it is, it appears to be related to the vacuum energy of space-time. If you have a completely empty box, devoid of all matter and radiation, you are left with nothing but vacuum. Quantum mechanics tells us that that vacuum is alive, a roiling, bubbling sea of fundamental particles constantly vibrating in and out of existence. And dark energy appears to be a manifestation of that vacuum energy. As the universe expands, there's more empty space, more vacuum, and so, more dark energy.
Tomberon.
5 billion years ago was the turnover point, when the density of matter dropped for the first time below the density of dark energy. And since then, it's only gotten worse. At the present epoch, dark energy accounts for roughly 70% of
でもレアなアイテムに見えるわ。
In the future, it will be 90%, then 99%, then even more, building up each other. The universe continues to expand. As that expansion accelerates, it only drives the creation of more dark energy, a process that has no time end, and there's no time to slow it down. Dark energy will not let the universe stand still. It will destroy the
悪く思わないでね。
The voids of our universe are by definition almost entirely empty of matter. Only the occasional thin filament of ionized gas of small dwarf galaxy. They are almost entirely pure vacuum, which means that they are filled with dark energy, and driven to expand by the repulsive effects of that dark force. The voids are therefore the precise locations within the universe where the accelerated expansion takes place. As time goes on, the voids will only get bigger and merge, driving the galaxies at their edges away from each other faster than their gravitational attraction can keep them together. The only objects that will survive the growing darkness will be those that are already gravitationally bound. This means that our local group will survive, although transformed,
全てが破壊されるのをとくと見よ。
and it means that clusters like Virgo will also survive, safe harbors for the thousands of galaxies that already call home. But the superclusters are not. Laniakea, Shapley, and this is the one thing way to lead the backbone of the cosmic web will not maintain that cohesion.
ちょっといたずらはやめて。
They simply did not have time to pull themselves closer together before the forces of dark energy began their work 5 billion years ago.
便利じゃない。
And finally, we will never complete our journey. The Milky Way will continue on its tragic course with Andromeda, the local group will never make it.
刀に力がみなぎったわ。
The great attractor or whatever lies beyond. Billions of years from now, towards the great attractor will slow down, stop, and reverse. Those course of hundreds of billions of years,
私こそリジン。
distant galaxies dim and fade from view, eventually slipping over our cosmological horizon, caught up in an accelerated expansion driven
ちょっと
by
修
dark
復させ
energy.
て。
Indeed, after a long enough time, trillions of years from now, the mega galaxy that was once the local group will be isolated, adrift, seen nothingness, as every other galaxy slips away.
いたずらはやめて。
Our motion will cease. Gravitational interactions within the future galaxy will cause stars to randomly scatter away.
ちょっと
Once they slip outside of the
いたずらはやめて。
race, they too will be caught up in the accelerated expansion, flung away, they will never care.
便利じゃ
One
な
by
い。
one, star by star, our galaxy,
Fucking break.
the same fate will apply to every macroscopic object. Hundreds of trillions of years from now, individual
妖刀にかなう相手はいない。
separated by vast spaces faster than light itself.
ちょっと待ってて。
Nothing left in the wider universe.
我こそは妖刀の化
Outside
身。
frames of reference with no stars to gauge motion against or Hubble flows to compare to. With no other sources of attraction or repulsion. The universe, what's left of it. Finally. Come to rest.
左右切り捨てごめん。
You've been watching the
できない。
entire history of the universe. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave us a comment to tell us what you think. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
武器は治ったわ。行こう。ちょっと修復
Big
させて。
bang. Did not bang. It's not a bomb. There was no blast, no debris, no shrapnel. The universe was simply smaller in the past and bigger in the future. And that is not the only misconception you may have. Bang.
いたず
In
らは
which
やめて。
the Big Bang didn't happen anywhere. It happened everywhere.
しみる。
It was not an event in space, but rather an event in time. Clock, not Chinahula. It occurred in the finite
ちょっ
past
と
of
す
heaven.
べてを終わらせる。
Every atom, every particle, every point can trace its evolutionary origins back through the eons to the Big Bang. The Big Bang happened in the room we're in right now. It happened in the Andromeda galaxy. It happened inside you. It happened within the entire expanse of the known and unknown universe. The entire universe was smaller, hotter, and denser in the past. Now it's not. That is the great lesson of the Big Bang. And so the universe has no center and no edge. It expands from nowhere and expands to nowhere. The universe did not originate from a single point in space. The Big Bang was a point from which space originated.
我こそは妖刀の化身。
In these statements lies an inconsistency, a paradox. 13.787 billion years ago, our theories tell us that the universe, the entire universe, regardless of its size, even if infinite, was contained somehow in a singularity, a point of infinite density and no spatial extent. But this makes no sense. This does not obey the rules of reason or logic. And this is because the Big Bang singularity is not a true representation of what everything was. It is simply a heavy hint that our equations, our maths, our physics is dysfunctional. The singularity is a sign that we do not understand our origins, the earliest moments of the Big Bang. But in the darkness of that uncertainty is nurtured the seed of a new awakening. For in our ignorance of the Big Bang, we have
Wait,
the opportunity, for now only seen as the ghosts and whispers of mercilessly complicated mathematics, to pierce the veil of our own beginning, to try and deduce what came before the birth of everything. Because at one time, there was no universe.
暗闇は
There
満ちた
was. This is the mystery of creation, the paradox of our reality revealed by the existence of the expansion of the universe. But was that beginning truly the beginning? Did time start with the Big Bang? Did our universe come to existence only at that moment? Or was there something before, either similar to our cosmos or entirely different? If the Big Bang was the beginning
とっ
of
てもレ
everything
アなアイ
we
テムに
know,
見えるわ。
was it also the beginning of
全てが破壊されるのを
Was
と
our
くと見よ
universe just a small part of
と
a
っても
grander
レアなアイテ
fabric?
ムに見えるわ。
Greater story that has been told since the distant ages of time past and will continue to exist well after our cosmos has sunk into cold oblivion. In 2022, incredible results started to arrive from the new James Webb Space Telescope.
ついてるわね。
Rumors online and in the press started to spread that they were a death knell for the Big Bang Theory. Of course, this was not the case, and served as a great example of the importance of media
ついてるわね。
literacy, which is why I'm excited to have Ground News kindly sponsor this video. Ground News aggregates the world's news in one place, so you can compare coverage and verify your information, and it's been a big help in my research. For example, last month, solar storms were reported to disrupt communication and produce northern lights as far as the southern US. On Ground News, I was able to access over 200 articles published on this. At a glance, nearly 90% were from sources rated highly factual, indicating coverage is less subjective, which is important for science news. Comparing coverage is also interesting. NPR suggested the storms disrupted communications, while the majority of the sources, including phys.org, emphasized the northern lights and no serious problems. And so, if you're looking for a better way to get the full picture, I encourage you to visit ground.news/HOTU. Subscribe through my link to save 40% off unlimited access. And by subscribing, you're not only supporting the channel, but transparency in the media as well. It was 2013, and it was time to party. The attendees gathered in the main hall of the Paris Observatory, a grand building situated on the south side of Paris, near the old gates to the city. People got up to speak to congratulate each other on the successful mission and a job well done, including some remarks that there was, of course, more work to be done in the coming month. But before anyone could dwell too much on the tasks ahead, they marvelled as cases were brought out from a back room. The cases were full of champagne, but not just any champagne. The organisers of the party had commissioned a special bottling, and the bottles had custom labels. Each bottle had an oval disc with an odd, speckled pattern. That pattern was the Cosmic Microwave Background, or CMB, a background radiation from just after the Big Bang.
お前たちの命の道は俺が断ち切った
First public release of the Planck satellite data, and they had every reason to celebrate. Data taken by Planck was confirmed as a cosmological model and the story of the Big Bang. All of this, it found evidence that the theory of inflation, a hypothetical event where the very early universe grew exponentially larger in a short amount of time, was on the right track. The Big Bang wasn't really a Big Bang. The Big Bang, name coined somewhat derisively by astronomer Fred Hoyle, is really just a generic description of the model of the universe where our cosmos used to be smaller in the past and will be larger in the future. In this model, there really isn't an explosive event that launches the creation of the
終わりなき
universe.
大厄災が来る
Unfolding of space that gives rise to everything we know. Instead, it's much simpler. is just a mere expansion from a smaller state to a bigger one. And from that theory, we can assign a number, 13.787, with an uncertainty of 0.02. A simple number, but this number is special. It's our current best estimate in billions of years of the age of the universe.
普通に満ちた顔で
Direct consequence of
震
the
え
Big
をお
Bang
のの
theory
け
is that there was a time before time. There was a moment when the universe simply became, and that moment existed 13.787 billion years ago. But that's only the dimension of time. As far as we know, the three dimensions of space that also make up our universe could be infinitely big. Yes, there is a limit to our observable cosmos, a boundary set by the finiteness of the speed of light. That limit sits about 45 billion light years away. Beyond that, we presume that there is more universe, more stars and galaxies and gas and dust. But we don't know. Our universe could live infinitely into the future, even when our cosmos expands so far and so much that all the stars die out and existence is nothing more than a thin soup of particles near a temperature of absolute zero. The universe will still exist. Time will still march forward. Direction of space will still be in place. The past is different. There is a limit to what we perceive, a boundary of our understanding. Even if the universe is infinitely big and will extend forever into the future, pain is something. This simple, straightforward two-band model like the apparent succession of galaxies. The appearance of the cosmic microwave background, including the amount of light elements in the cosmos. In fact, no other cosmological theory is able to explain the existence of all those facts. Just like any other scientific theory or model, the Big Bang also should be. In 1979, physicist ARIGATO theoretical extremely universe in time seem to naturally produce a significant number of defects. Strings, bizarre intergalactic regions of space and time. However, none of these oddities had ever been observed in the
全てが破壊されるのをとくと見よ
was a little more like its namesake than we previously suspected. A little bang. So we proposed a new entity to inhabit the cosmos. Something called a scalar field. Scalar fields were not a new idea in physics. Quantum field theory, which, alongside Einstein's general theory of relativity, underlies our understanding of reality, is strange. Everything that exists, every particle and every form of radiation, is really the manifestation of an underlying quantum field that fills the universe. These quantum fields soak space and time the same way that olive oil and vinegar soak a piece of bread. Every particle has its own associated field, one for the photons, known as the electromagnetic field, one for the electrons, known as the Dirac field, and so on and so on. When one of these quantum fields has a local excitation, a region of power applications, we see that as an active particle. But of course, even when a patch of the universe contains no particles, the field exist, which have a single value, magnitude, associated with every point in space-time. Every time you see a weather forecast, the map of temperatures across the scalar field, a single number, in this case a temperature, associated with every point on the map. The eminent physicist Peter Higgs had already introduced the language of scalar fields decades before Guth, when he proposed what is now called the Higgs field, a scalar field working in the background of space-time that is responsible for mass. But now it was Guth's turn to invent a new scalar field that radically altered the dynamics of space-time in the distant past. This scalar field would permeate all of space and time, simply existing in the early universe. Then, randomly and suddenly, this scalar field would experience a dramatic phase transition, collapsing itself into a lower energy state. This collapse would provide the energy necessary to make the infant universe much, much bigger in a very short amount of time. Indeed, Guth estimated that if the universe inflated by at least a factor of 10 to the power of 50 or so in less than a second, then all of those troublesome defects would simply be scattered to the four corners of the cosmos, well outside our observable limits. And as well as this, the process of a rapid inflation event would solve two other challenges to the traditional Big Bang model. It would explain why the universe could have a uniform temperature despite its enormous size, because prior to inflation the cosmos homogenized, and why it is so flat. If you take any geometry you want and make it really big, then it will always appear flat to observers, just like the Earth appears flat in your garden. And so, because this idea of inflation so neatly explains several features of the observed universe, cosmologists began taking it seriously, and with